New York City labor riots of 1834.
The Baltimore attackers of Douglass had imitated the sentiment of New York immigrant workers a few years earlier. For 8 days in July 1834, immigrants' fear of the mere possibility of a future flood of newly freed slaves from the South competing with them for jobs in New York City boiled over into a full-scale riot involving thousands. It drew international attention. The Times of London reported on the impetus of what it called the disgraceful riots.
The Friends of Negro Emancipation have, it appears, been holding meetings in New York and other cities of the Union to promote that object. These meetings excited the alarm of the ignorant whites, whose hatred, being inflamed, led to the perpetration of acts of riot and of spoliation which deeply disgraced the American name. Mobs composed of the very dregs of the whites attacked the churches, the dwelling houses, and the stores of the prominent abolitionists which they gutted and robbed. They also attacked the dwellings and the stores of the leading colored people, destroying their furniture and stealing their goods. The civil force, unable to check the career of the rioters, the mayor of the city called out the military, and the united power succeeded on the night of the 11th in putting an end to the most flagrant and most disgraceful outrages that ever occurred in the United States.
As disgraceful as were the actions of the rioting immigrant workers, their precarious existence in the city must be acknowledged to understand their criminal passions. Packed in overcrowded, unsafe, and unhealthy tenements, the immigrant workers could not imagine how they could survive if they lost any ground in wages, let alone if they lost their jobs. The immigrants correctly assumed that if the abolitionists were successful and slavery ended in the South, large numbers of freed slaves would head north. The immigrants did not have to be economists to know that the additional increase in the labor supply would depress wages and create even more labor conflict. Their egregious error of logic and ethics, however, was to assume that they, as recent arrivals, had the higher claim for jobs over African Americans, most of whom had generations of roots in this country. It was not black workers who were undercutting immigrant workers, but the other way around. Thus, African Americans not only were suffering discrimination in the hiring lines and union memberships, but were then being physically attacked by the immigrant workers whose growing presence made that discrimination possible. The labor tensions could have been reduced if the government had put a stop to the continuous arrival of ships full of new foreign workers whose volume was further undercutting all the existing workers and inflaming their passions. But the leaders of the United States had not yet grasped that the greatly improved ease, safety, and cost of traveling from Europe to America was necessitating numerical immigration limits enforced by the government. Instead, the government allowed the volume of new and unneeded foreign workers to rapidly increase. Annual immigration continued to fluctuate up and down, but always to higher and higher levels. 1840 saw a new record high of 84,000. It climbed further to 105,000 in 1842, down to 52,000 the next year, more than double to 114,000 in 1845. Half again higher to 154,000 in 1846, and another half increase to 235,000 in 1847, and all the way to 370,000 in 1850. More immigrants arrived in the 3 years of 1848 through 1850 than arrived the entire decades of the 1820s and 1830s combined. Douglass bemoaned what he witnessed.
It is evident, painfully evident to every reflecting mind, that the means of living for colored men are becoming more and more precarious and limited. Employments and callings, formerly monopolized by us, are so no longer.
As immigration continued to increase, the conditions for free black Americans in the North grew worse, and slavery in the South was administered more harshly. Rising immigration from the 1820s to the Civil War depressed wages for free black Americans and immigrants alike. Jeffrey Williamson and Peter Lindert's Macroeconomic History shows that between 1816 and 1856, the American Northeast was transformed from the, quote, Jeffersonian ideal to a society more typical of underdeveloped countries with marked income inequality and very low wages for laborers.